no shenda atasha nina ukunaya is a saying from the Bemba wisdom tradition that loosely translates a child that does not travel exalts its mother's cooking. And it means when one is not exposed, their worldview remains narrow and limited. Over the past few years, I have become interested in the question of identity as a result of my personal experience with an existential crisis. Nestled in the heart of Southern Africa, Zambia is a land linked, culturally diverse country. It has a rich cultural heritage, a vibrant social fabric that has been shaped, developed, and influenced by many factors. The various indigenous ethnic groups share common values and customs that inform the unique cultural practices and social norms of the people. Colonialism, foreign religion, and more recently, globalization, among others, have contributed their share of influences on the contemporary Zambian identity. For every society, from the smallest unit of the family to be functional and to thrive, there are social etiquettes that govern behavior. In the context of the collective Zambian society, these often cut across relationship dynamics of age, gender, social ranking, and marital status. So, what really is the main core of our collective cultural heritage? One word: respect. Healthy boundaries across all the different kinds of relationships, even as they shift, evolve, and transform. Respect encompasses tolerance, compassion, and honor. As a little girl, I remember my dad, he's here in the audience, having a distinctly different kind of relationship with his mother in law, my Gogo Kate. Unlike with other relationships, these two would not make eye contact or even shake hands, but for special occasions. There was a sort of reverence in how they interacted with each other. I'm sure many of you in this room today have experienced that in your different family dynamics. Today, a couple of years shy of 80, my dad has a much more relaxed relationship with his several daughters in law. This is an example of how this type of relationship can shift, evolve, and transform and still maintain respect. Etiquette is the single most universal passport to the world. It is the simple, everyday grace that can make or ruin a day in a moment. It is synonymous with uprightness of character and associated with such virtues as fairness, kindness, integrity, and justice. Its nuances vary according to the social settings. What is appropriate in one environment may not be so in another. Think about how you're expected to rise and make eye contact to acknowledge senior officers in the professional workspace. This is a prescription from our colonial masters. Our protocol from our ancestors, however, says we have to bow down and sometimes even prostrate ourselves to acknowledge the elders and traditional leaders. You will agree that politicians make use of this strategy to win the favor of the electorate during election season. We hail from a great heritage, from a great civilization whose values were continuously reinforced through various everyday situations, such as rites of passage, ritual, ceremony, proverbs, taboos, myths, story, and even song, such as this one. Magi waona ndelele mwana, magi waona ndelele mwana, magi ndelele mwana, vilimba vikalila mwana utaye. This is a teaching song that is a caution mainly to young adults to remind them to prioritize responsibilities over entertainment. Zambia, like many African countries, got its independence in the 1960s. Perhaps two questions we need to reflect on collectively would be around the question of cultural identity and cultural conquest. One, how have we liberated ourselves from the shackles of colonialism and forged a trajectory that honors our cultural heritage and still remains relevant to the modern world? And two, are we actively participating in the process of globalization and making positive contributions to the larger world from our colorful heritage? The current generation seems to be more invested in rights and entitlements than in privileges and responsibilities. Here's an illustration. Since around the turn of the century, you may have observed a shift in how people do weddings. Instead of allowing guests to bring thoughtful gifts, the invitation will often solicit monetary gifts. And many of us find this distasteful and even complain about it. But we play along, don't we? Relationships become toxic and even dysfunctional, not for lack of love, rather for want of respect. Living in a global village with global media, we all operate within a complex mix of contexts. The modern young person, in particular, is more often than not properly oriented to engage consciously in the diverse social situations. When we take a moment and look around us using the lenses of our cultural heritage, we realize that we have strayed far from who we have been or sometimes claim to be. I have often contemplated this thought that suppose our ancestors took a sneak peek into our era, what would they see? I wonder if they would recognize us. Would they be proud of our cultural evolution? Or suppose we considered the fate of our descendants. I shudder at the thought that this generation of independent Africa shall be judged harshly by posterity. Now, at what point or points did the paradigm shift? The shift happens every time we drop the F from the word shift, pun intended. Every time we negate or silence our languages in preference to those of our colonizers, the shift happens. Every time we undermine the names and naming rituals of our ancestors that they have used for millennia, every time we condemn and denounce indigenous religions and relegate them to witchcraft, every time we undermine indigenous knowledge systems and wisdom, these and many other subtle shifts contribute to the erasure of our collective identity. In order to be appropriate and experience harmonious relations within families, religious communities, places of work, and other spaces of social engagement, the values of respect and sensibility create social cohesion. The collective Zambian identity honors diversity in all of its various guises and expressions. If we lose our identity, if we lose the value of our identity, we sabotage our future. The Tumbuka have a saying. This is an ethnic group that is found across Southern Africa and East Africa. Kachande kaderere kakwenderana. And it is equivalent to one good turn deserves another. Respect is reciprocal. Bearing in mind the foregoing, I invite you to reflect on the following question. How will the positive and unique Indigenous values that create part of our identity stand firm in a constantly evolving world?